Vexith stared at the ancient star chart floating above her workstation. The holographic display cast blue light across her scaled features as she traced a clawed finger along the spiral arm of the galaxy. Everything was there. Every star system, every trade route, every colony world, everything except one massive region of space that simply ended at a clean, sharp border. The label read simply, Human Space. She leaned back in her chair, her tail curling with confusion. As a junior cartographer for the Galactic Concordance Archives, her job was to update old maps with new survey data. But this map, like every other map in the database for the past 800 cycles, showed nothing inside human territory. No stars, no planets, no navigation points. Just blank space with a simple warning at the border. Do not enter. What made it stranger was that nobody seemed to care. When she mentioned it to her supervisor that morning, he had simply nodded and moved on to other topics. When she asked her coworker at lunch why the maps were incomplete, he had stared at her for a long moment, then changed the subject without answering. It was like everyone knew something she did not. Or worse, like they knew but refused to remember. Vexith pulled up the historical archives, going back further than she probably should. The older maps showed more detail. 500 cycles ago, human space was marked but still blank. 700 cycles ago, the same. But then she found something. A map from 850 cycles ago, before the Great Silence. This map was different. Human space was fully charted, with dozens of star systems marked, trade routes connecting them to the rest of the galaxy, and even diplomatic stations at the borders. Humans had been members of the Concordance. They had traded with other species. They had embassies and cultural exchange programs, and then suddenly they were gone, not destroyed, not conquered, just withdrawn. The maps after that date showed the border growing, the buffer zone expanding, and the interior details disappearing as if someone had carefully erased them. Vexith felt a chill run down her spine. She pulled up the official records of the Great Silence. The entry was surprisingly short for such a major event. It read, "In Concordance Year 3247, humanity withdrew from galactic society. All treaties dissolved by mutual agreement. Border established. No further contact, that was it. No explanation, no reason. Just a simple statement of fact that somehow everyone accepted without question." She dug deeper, accessing the restricted archives with her low-level security clearance. Most files about humans were marked with a strange classification she had never seen before. Voluntary Amnesia Protocol. When she tried to open them, a warning appeared. This information may cause psychological distress. Species-level trauma response possible. Proceed with caution. Her hand hovered over the accept button. Every instinct told her to close the file and forget about it. But she was a cartographer. Her entire life was about filling in blank spaces on maps. She could not leave this mystery unsolved. She pressed accept. The file opened, and what she saw made her blood run cold. It was a military report from the time of the Great Silence. The words were clinical, carefully neutral, but the meaning was clear. 7 species had formed a coalition. They called themselves the Unity Alliance. They had decided that humanity was weak, too individualistic to be a threat, and that human space contained valuable resources. So they invaded. The report listed fleet numbers. Millions of ships. Billions of soldiers. It should have been a quick conquest. The Unity Alliance was powerful, made up of some of the most advanced military forces in the galaxy. But then the report stopped. The last entry, dated 3 cycles after the invasion began, was a single line. All contact lost with invasion forces. No survivors. No wreckage. Now Trace Vexith read it again. Millions of ships. Billions of soldiers, gone, not destroyed in battle, not captured, just gone as if they had never existed. 3 cycles after that, a single human ship had arrived at the Concordance Council chambers. The recording was still in the archive. Vexith pulled it up with shaking hands. The video showed a human woman, middle-aged by their standards, wearing a simple diplomatic uniform. She stood before the assembled council members and spoke in a calm, even voice. "We did not want this war. We did not seek conflict, but your Unity Alliance chose to invade our homes, threaten our families, and attempt to take what was ours. We have responded appropriately. Your invasion forces are gone. They will not return. They cannot return. We have made certain of that. The human paused, and her expression softened slightly. We bear you no further ill will. We do not wish to conquer or dominate, but we have learned that our presence in the galactic community creates temptation and danger. Therefore, we are withdrawing. We will establish a border. We will not cross it. You will not cross it. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of reality. We hope one day that circumstances may change. Until then, goodbye. The video ended. The council chamber recording showed the assembled representatives sitting in stunned silence. And then, one by one, they had agreed. The border was established. The treaties were dissolved. And humanity withdrew behind their wall. Vexith sat in her chair, her mind racing. The blank space on the map suddenly made perfect sense. It was not ignorance. It was not a lack of data. It was fear. A fear so deep that every species in the galaxy carried it in their genetic memory. A fear that made them instinctively avoid even thinking about what lay beyond that border. She looked at the map again. The clean border, the empty space, the simple warning. And for the first time in 800 cycles, someone asked the forbidden question, what happened to those millions of ships? Where did they go? And what had humanity become that could make them simply vanish? Vexith knew she should stop. She should close the files, delete her search history, and go back to updating trade routes and colony positions. That was the safe choice. The sane choice, but she was a cartographer. And there was a blank space on her map. She pulled up a new file and began making notes. If nobody else would ask these questions, then she would. If nobody else would investigate, then she would find others who could. Somewhere in this galaxy, there had to be someone who remembered without fear, someone whose genetic memory was broken or damaged, someone who could help her learn the truth. The map floated above her desk, the blank space seeming larger now, more ominous, but also more inviting. Behind that border was a mystery 800 cycles old. Behind that border was the truth about what humanity had become, and Vexith intended to find it. 3 weeks later, Vexith sat in a dark bar on the edge of concordant space. The establishment catered to outcasts and wanderers, those who did not quite fit into normal society. It was the perfect place to find the people she needed. Her search had led her to some interesting discoveries. There were others like her scattered across the galaxy. Individuals whose species' memory did not work properly. Some had genetic defects. Others had suffered brain injuries. A few had simply been born different. But they all shared one thing in common. They did not feel the instinctive fear when humans were mentioned. One of them sat across from her now. Captain Zilthos was a Vryn, a species known for their military prowess. But Zilthos was old, with scars across his carapace and one eye replaced by a mechanical implant. He had served near human space before, the Great Silence, though he claimed to remember nothing from that time. You are asking dangerous questions, young one, he said, his voice like grinding stone. His good eye studied her carefully. Why do you want to know about them? Because the maps are wrong, Vexith replied. Because there is a massive blank space in our charts, and nobody wants to talk about why. Because I am a cartographer and I cannot accept incomplete data. Zilthos laughed, a harsh sound. That is a better reason than most. Very well. I will tell you what I know. But first, you must understand something. The fear you do not feel, it is there for a reason. Your ancestors learned something so terrifying that they coded it into their very DNA. They wanted their children and their children's children to know one simple truth. Stay away from human space. He took a long drink from his cup before continuing. I was there, he said quietly, at the border. After the invasion, they sent us to investigate what happened to the Unity Alliance fleet. We found nothing. No debris, no bodies, no energy signatures. It was as if millions of ships had simply ceased to exist, but we did find something else. What? Vexith leaned forward. Art, Zilthos said. The humans had left art. We found 3 planets where the Unity Alliance had established forward bases. The bases were gone, but in their place were sculptures. Beautiful, terrible sculptures made from materials we could not identify. Each one was different, but they all showed the same thing. Ships frozen in impossible shapes, twisted into forms that should not exist in 3-dimensional space. He shuddered at the memory. They were not just destroyed, they were transformed, changed into something else. And the most terrifying part? Our scientists studied the sculptures. They determined that the ships were still there, still occupied. The crews were still alive inside, existing in some state we could not understand. The humans had not killed their attackers. They had turned them into warnings. Vexith felt her scales crawl. That is impossible. No species has that kind of power. No technology can do that. That is what we thought too. Zilthos agreed. But the humans did it anyway, and that was when we understood. The Unity Alliance had not attacked a weak species. They had attacked something far beyond our comprehension. Something that saw our most powerful weapons as toys. Something that could reshape reality itself. Over the next few days, Vexith met with others. A xenopsychologist named Dr. Halvan explained the science behind the genetic memory. When a species experiences extreme trauma, the fear response can be coded into their DNA and passed to future generations. Entire populations could inherit instinctive reactions to threats their ancestors faced. But this is different, Halvan said, her tendrils waving excitedly. This is not just genetic memory. This is something more. Every species in the concordance, regardless of their biology, shares the same reaction to humans. It is as if the fear itself was implanted directly into the collective consciousness of the galaxy. Could the humans do that? Vexith asked. Halvan paused. If they can turn ships into living sculptures, then yes, I believe they could. But why would they? Why create this universal amnesia? Vexith thought about the diplomatic message she had seen. The human woman's words echoed in her mind. We bear you no further ill will. Maybe it was mercy, she said slowly. Maybe they did not want us to live with the knowledge of what they had done. Maybe they thought it would be kinder to make us forget. That evening, Vexith returned to her small apartment with her head full of information. She had learned enough to understand the basics. 800 cycles ago, humanity had been attacked. They had responded with power beyond comprehension. And then they had withdrawn, taking their secrets with them. But she still did not know the most important thing. What had humanity become? What kind of beings had they evolved into that could manipulate reality itself? She pulled up the star charts again, looking at the border. It had been stable for 800 cycles. Nothing went in. Nothing came out. The humans had kept their word, but now Vexith had a choice to make. She could stop here. She had learned enough to satisfy her curiosity. She could fill in the blank space on her map with a simple note, Forbidden Zone, and move on with her life. Or she could do something incredibly stupid. She could try to cross the border. The idea was insane. Everyone she had spoken with had warned her against it. Even those without the genetic fear understood that approaching human space was dangerous. The sculptures alone proved that humans did not welcome visitors, but Vexith was a cartographer, and there was still a blank space on her map. She began making preparations. She would need a ship. She would need a crew of people who did not feel the fear. She would need supplies and equipment. Most importantly, she would need information about the border itself. How was it defended? Were there warning systems? Could it even be crossed? As she worked, she kept thinking about the diplomatic message. The human woman had said they hoped circumstances might change one day. What did that mean? Were they waiting for something? Were they hoping that eventually the galaxy would be ready for contact again? Or were they simply being polite while delivering an ultimatum? Vexith did not know, but she intended to find out. She sent out messages to everyone she had met. Captain Zilthos, Dr. Halvan, others who had expressed interest in her research. The message was simple. I am going to the border. I am going to learn the truth. Who wants to come with me? The ship was called the Wanderer's Hope, an old transport vessel that had seen better days. Vexith had bought it with her savings and some questionable loans. It was not much, but it had a functioning drive system and enough space for her small crew. 7 people had answered her call. Captain Zilthos, who claimed he wanted one last adventure before he died. Dr. Halvin, who saw this as the research opportunity of a lifetime, 3 others whose genetic memories were damaged in various ways, and one very special member, X-41, was an artificial intelligence construct from before the Great Silence. It had been found in a derelict station near the border, its memory core still intact. Unlike organic beings, X-41 did not have genetic memory. It remembered everything exactly as it had happened. "I have been waiting for someone to ask the right questions," X-41 said, its voice coming through the ship's speakers. "For 800 cycles, I have been waiting for someone brave enough, or foolish enough, to seek the truth." "What do you remember?" Vexith asked as they prepared for departure. "Everything," X-41 replied. "I remember when humans were just another species in the concordance. They were creative, curious, sometimes aggressive, but fundamentally similar to everyone else. They had faster-than-light travel, but nothing exceptional. They had weapons, but nothing that made them stand out. They were ordinary." "What changed?" Dr. Halvin asked. "The war changed them," X-41 said. "Or perhaps it revealed what they always were. When the Unity Alliance invaded, humanity responded in ways that should have been impossible. They manipulated gravity to turn entire fleets into singularities. They bent space-time to trap ships in infinite loops. They reached into the quantum field and rewrote the probability of their enemy's existence." The AI paused as if choosing its words carefully. But the most terrifying part was that they were not using technology. They were doing it themselves. Individual humans, acting together, somehow channeling forces that should have required massive machinery and enormous power sources. It was as if the war had awakened something dormant in their species. Something that had been sleeping, waiting for a reason to emerge. The Wanderer's Hope left port 3 days later. They set course for the buffer zone, the empty region of space surrounding human territory. It would take 2 weeks to reach the border at normal speeds. As they traveled, X-41 continued to share its memories. It told them about the sculptures Zilthos had mentioned. There had been more than 3. Dozens of them, scattered throughout the buffer zone. Each one was a masterpiece, and each one was a warning. One sculpture showed a fleet of ships woven together into a spiral pattern that somehow existed in 4 dimensions. Another showed vessels transformed into crystal structures that sang with harmonics from multiple universes. A third displayed warships folded into shapes that the eye could not quite process, creating optical illusions that made viewers physically ill. They were not just warnings, X-41 explained. They were demonstrations. The humans were showing the galaxy what they could do. And more importantly, what they chose not to do. They could have turned every species into living art. Instead, they chose isolation. 2 weeks later, they reached the buffer zone. The change was immediately noticeable. Space itself felt different here, cleaner somehow. The usual background radiation of a populated galaxy was absent. No ship traffic, no communication signals, no signs of civilization, just empty space and abandoned worlds. They found the first sculpture on the 3rd day in the buffer zone. It hung in space near a dead planet, exactly where X-41's memories had placed it. The AI had not lied. The sculpture was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Vexith stared at it through the view screen. Dozens of warships, each one kilometers long, had been twisted and merged into a single flowing shape that resembled a flower, but it was a flower that hurt to look at, its petals existing in angles that should not be possible. Dr. Halvin ran scans. The readings are impossible. The ships are still there. The crews are still alive inside. But they exist in a state of suspended time. For them, only a moment has passed since they were transformed. They will stay like this forever unless something changes them back. "Can they be changed back?" one of the crew members asked. "Only by whoever did this to them," Halvin replied. "Only by humans." They continued deeper into the buffer zone, finding more sculptures. Each one was different. Each one showcased a different aspect of human capability. One showed ships converted into living ecosystems, with plants and animals that should not exist growing from the metal. Another displayed vessels turned into musical instruments, their hulls vibrating with sounds that created emotions directly in the mind. They were playing, Zilthos said, his voice filled with old fear. The Unity Alliance sent their best warriors, their most advanced weapons, and the humans treated it like a game. They were not trying to win. They were experimenting, testing their abilities. Finally, after 5 days in the buffer zone, they reached it, the border. It was not a physical wall or a line of defense stations. It was simply a place where space changed. On one side, normal space-time. On the other side, something different. Something that their instruments could not properly measure. Vexith brought the ship to a stop at what she estimated was a safe distance. They all gathered on the bridge, staring at the view screen. Before them, hanging in space, was a simple holographic message. It appeared in every language known to the Concordance, including several that had gone extinct. The message read, "Turn back. This is your final courtesy. Cross this line and we cannot guarantee your safety, not from us but from what we have become. We do not wish to harm you. Please do not make us choose." "So they are still here," Halvin whispered. "Still watching, still aware of us. They never left," X-41 confirmed. "They just withdrew. There is a difference." Vexith studied the message. The wording was careful, polite, but also absolute. This was not a negotiation. It was a simple statement of reality. "What do we do?" one of the crew asked. Vexith thought about the sculptures, about the Unity Alliance fleet that had disappeared, about 800 cycles of silence. And then she thought about why she had come here in the first place, because there was a blank space on her map. She took a deep breath and opened a communication channel toward the border. "This is Vexith of the Galactic Concordance. I am a cartographer. I have come to fill in the blank space on my map. I do not seek to invade or threaten. I only want to understand. Will you speak with me?" For 3 hours, nothing happened. The crew waited in tense silence, watching the border. Vexith had almost given up hope when the sensors detected something approaching. It was not a ship. At least not in any conventional sense. Space itself seemed to fold and unfold, and suddenly there was a vessel where moments before there had been nothing. It did not fly toward them. It simply became present in their vicinity, as if it had always been there and they had only just noticed. The design was beautiful and alien. It looked organic, like a living thing grown rather than built. Smooth curves and flowing lines that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. A communication signal came through. "Voice only. May I come aboard?" a woman asked. Her tone was warm, almost friendly. "I promise I mean no harm. I just thought it would be easier to talk face to face." Vexith looked at her crew. Everyone was nervous, but they had come this far. She activated the comm. "You are welcome aboard the Wanderer's Hope." The woman appeared in their airlock without any visible means of transport. One moment the space was empty, the next she was there as if she had simply decided to exist in that location. She was human, appearing to be in her 30s with dark hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple uniform that looked like it came from centuries ago. "My name is Elena Vasquez," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I am a commander in the Human Concordance Defense Fleet. Or at least I was. The titles do not mean much anymore." Vexith carefully shook the offered hand. "How old are you?" she asked, unable to help herself. Elena smiled. 417 standard cycles. I was 28 when the war started. I am still 28 in most ways that matter. We do not age anymore. Not in the way we used to. They gathered in the ship's common area. Helena sat comfortably, seemingly at ease despite being surrounded by alien species. She accepted a drink that Dr. Halvin offered, though Vexith suspected she did not need it. "I know you have questions," Elena began. "I will answer what I can. But first you need to understand something. We did not want this. We did not want to become what we are. The war forced it upon us. What are you?" Vexith asked directly. Elena took a long breath. "That is a complicated question. The simple answer is that we evolved, or perhaps ascended is a better word. When the Unity Alliance invaded, humanity was desperate. We were facing extinction, and in that moment of crisis, something in our species awakened, a potential that had always been there, dormant, waiting." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "We started being able to affect reality with our minds. Not in the way of psychic powers or magic. It was more fundamental than that. We could reach into the quantum field and influence probability. We could perceive and manipulate dimensions beyond the normal three. We could touch the fabric of space-time itself and shape it. And it spread, she continued. Once one human discovered they could do it, others learned. It was like a door had been opened in our collective consciousness. Within weeks, millions of humans had the ability. Within months, billions. It was not technology, it was us. We had changed at a fundamental level. But that should be impossible, Dr. Halvin protested. Evolution does not work that fast. You cannot change an entire species in a few months, Elena nodded. You are right. It should be impossible. We have theories, of course. Some think humanity was always different, that we carried dormant abilities from our evolutionary past. Others believe we unconsciously altered our own genetics in response to the threat. A few think something else intervened, though we have no proof of that. She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the border. Whatever the cause, the result was clear. We stopped the invasion. We did more than stop it. We demonstrated that we could reshape reality on a scale that terrified even us. And then we realized the terrible truth. We were dangerous, not because we wanted to be, but because we could not fully control what we had become. What do you mean? Zilthos asked. Elena turned back to face them. Our very presence affects other species. When we are near you, your thoughts are not entirely your own. You begin to see things the way we see them. Your free will becomes compromised. It is not intentional. We are not trying to control you. But it happens anyway. We exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and other beings get caught in our wake. She sat back down, her expression sad. That is why we withdrew. Not because we feared retaliation. Not because we wanted to conquer and needed time to prepare. We left because we were becoming a threat to everyone around us. We were changing reality just by existing, and we could not stop it. The only solution was isolation. The sculptures, Vexith said quietly. The Unity Alliance ships. You left them as warnings, yes and no, Elena replied. They were warnings, but they were also art. We had become beings that could create on a scale we never imagined. The ships that attacked us were tools of war and conquest. We transformed them into expressions of beauty. It was our way of showing that we bore no malice. We could have destroyed them completely. Instead, we chose to create. Can they be saved? Halvin asked. The crews inside? Helena nodded. Yes. If the galaxy ever asks if you are ready to face us again, we can restore them. They exist in suspended time. For them, barely a moment has passed. We keep them as a reminder, to ourselves and to others, a reminder of what we can do and what we choose not to do. Vexith leaned forward. You said if we are ready. What does that mean? When will the galaxy be ready? Elena smiled, a touch of sadness in her expression. When you can look at us without fear. When you can interact with us without your instincts screaming to run away. When you can accept that we are different now, but still your friends, still your neighbors, still human despite everything we have become. She stood, preparing to leave. You came here seeking knowledge, Vexith. I have given you what I can. Now you have a choice. You can take this knowledge back to the Concordance. You can begin the slow process of helping your people remember without fear, or you can forget. And I will ensure that forgetting is painless and complete. The choice is yours. Vexith stood as well, meeting Elena's eyes. I want to remember. I want to help others remember. I want to fill in the blank space on my map, not with warnings or fear, but with hope, with the understanding that one day maybe we can be neighbors again. Elena smiled, genuine warmth in her expression. Then you will be our ambassador. We will protect your memories, shield them from the genetic fear, and when you return to the Concordance, you can begin the long work of reconciliation. It may take centuries, but we are patient. We have learned patience in our isolation. Elena offered to show them something before they left. With the crew's permission, she guided their ship across the border. Vexith felt no physical change, but her instruments went wild. The laws of physics seemed different here, more flexible. What they saw beyond the border was impossible to fully comprehend. Space itself had been reshaped. Planets existed in configurations that should not work. Stars burned with colors that did not belong in the normal spectrum. And everywhere, there were structures that hurt the eye to look at directly. This is what we have built, Elena explained. Worlds that exist in multiple dimensions at once, cities that span timelines, gardens that grow in spaces between spaces. We have learned to shape reality like artists shape clay. This is our home now. It is beautiful, Vexith whispered. And terrifying. Yes, Elena agreed. Both of those things. We have become something magnificent and strange, something that cannot easily coexist with other species. But we miss you. We miss the community we had. We miss being part of the galaxy. She brought them to a viewing platform that overlooked a structure unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a gathering place, Elena explained. Millions of humans could meet here, their minds touching across dimensions, sharing thoughts and experiences simultaneously. We are lonely, Elena said simply. For all our power, for all we can do, we are isolated. We chose this isolation to protect you, but it comes at a cost. We remember what it was like to have alien friends, to learn from other cultures, to be part of something larger than ourselves. After several hours, Elena brought them back across the border. The Wanderers' hope settled back into normal space, and the crew took a collective breath they had not realized they were holding. Before you go, Elena said, I will give you a gift. She reached out and touched Vexith's forehead. Vexith felt a warmth spread through her mind. Your memories are now protected. The genetic fear cannot touch them. You will remember everything you have learned, and you will be able to share it without the automatic terror that has gripped the galaxy for 8 centuries. She did the same for each crew member, including X-41, though the AI claimed it did not need the protection. One more thing, Elena said. She handed Vexith a small device. This is a communication beacon. When your people are ready, when the fear has faded and understanding has grown, activate it. We will know, and we will come, not as conquerors or gods, but as neighbors, as friends, as humans. How long will that take? Zilthos asked. Elena smiled. Centuries, perhaps, maybe longer. We do not age, so we can afford to be patient. We have learned that rushing only creates more fear. The galaxy needs time to heal, time to process what happened, time to choose to remember rather than being forced to remember. She looked at each of them in turn. You are the first ambassadors of a new age, the bridge between what was and what might be again. It is a heavy responsibility, but I believe you can carry it. You have already proven your courage by coming here. And with that, Elena was gone, not walking away or returning to her ship, simply gone as if she had never been there. But the beacon remained in Vexith's hand, solid and real. The journey back took 2 weeks. The crew spent the time discussing what they had seen and what it meant. Dr. Halvin was already planning research papers. Zilthos was surprisingly quiet, processing his encounter with the species he had once feared. X-41 was simply happy to finally have the truth confirmed. Vexith spent the time updating her maps. She filled in the blank space with careful detail. Not the impossible structures they had seen, but simple notations. Human space, species in voluntary isolation, approach only with invitation, expected contact in approximately 500 cycles. When they reached concordant space, they were met with confusion and suspicion. Officials demanded to know where they had been. Other cartographers looked at Vexith's updated maps with horror and disbelief. But Vexith was patient. She began slowly, carefully sharing what she had learned. She started with individuals who showed curiosity rather than fear. She gave lectures at universities, speaking about the nature of genetic memory and how trauma could be inherited. She published papers about the history of human contact, backed by evidence from the archives. The work was slow. Many people refused to listen. Others listened but could not overcome their instinctive fear. But gradually, over years and then decades, attitudes began to shift. New generations grew up hearing stories about humanity not as monsters, but as a species that had chosen isolation rather than domination. As beings who had power beyond measure but used it with restraint, Vexith became known as the ambassador to the absent. She traveled across the galaxy, speaking to anyone who would listen. The beacon remained in her office, a constant reminder of the choice that lay ahead. 100 cycles passed. Then 200. Vexith grew old. Though medical technology extended her life far beyond what would have been natural, she trained others to carry on her work. A whole organization grew up around the goal of eventual reconciliation with humanity. The galactic maps changed. Slowly the blank space filled in, not with detailed surveys but with acknowledgement. Human space, friends in waiting, remember without fear. On the 300th anniversary of her journey to the border, Vexith stood before the Concordance Council. She was very old now, her scales dulled with age, but her mind was sharp and her purpose was clear. "I believe we are ready," she said. "Not all of us. Not perfectly, but ready enough. Ready to extend an invitation. Ready to say that we remember, we understand, and we choose hope over fear." The council debated for weeks. Finally, they agreed. The vote was not unanimous, but it was enough. Vexith activated the beacon. 3 days later, Elena Vasquez arrived at the Concordance chambers. She had not aged a day. She looked exactly as she had 300 cycles ago, when she had first met Vexith at the border. She smiled when she saw Vexith. "Thank you for remembering us. Thank you for not forgetting. Thank you for giving us hope that one day we might come home." The negotiations began slowly, carefully. Humans would not fully rejoin the Concordance, not yet, but there would be contact. Cultural exchanges, shared research, small steps toward a future where both sides could coexist. Vexith watched the first human cultural delegation arrive, and she felt something she had not felt in cycles. Not fear, not confusion, but joy. She returned to her office and pulled up the galactic map one last time. The blank space was still there, but it had changed. Now it showed human territory marked with a single word that represented 300 cycles of work, countless conversations, and the hope of 2 civilizations. The word was simple. The word was perfect. The word was friends.